rockets. This is the next generation of our family and of theological thought and of all things good and holy. And part of the reason that Dara and I have started this Queer Possible channel is that we are trying to record what is possible as queer folks in this crazy world in the year of our Lord 2019, and to kind of make a recording for the next generation, if you will. So the stories I tell and the questions I pose are for Rocket and for all of the offspring and their offspring in our wonderful queer family. The Bible is full of rerun stories, multiple versions of the same story. There are two different versions of the creation story, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. They're very different, and when you read them together, you discover they're extremely different, even in their message. There are four different versions, four different stories of how Jesus suffered and was tortured and killed and then rose. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John each tell that story. There are oodles of stories of how bread is broken and shared and multiplies to feed a magnificent crowd. You see those stories certainly in Jesus' ministry, but you see them also even before in Elijah and Elisha. So the Bible has this habit of repeating a good story over and over again. The story that I want to share with you this week is a story that we know we call the Prodigal Son story often. What's interesting to me about it is it is not repeated. It appears in Luke chapter 15, and that's it. That's it. There's no other rendition of it. And it is a story that Jesus is telling. It's not something, it's not like an event that they're recording. It is a story that Jesus tells. As I learned it and I've told it, it's about two different brothers. One who is the good, law-abiding, do everything right, follow the rules, make mommy and daddy happy brother. The other brother is the one who is pushing the boundaries and blows the inheritance and breaks every rule and runs amok and runs afoul and finds himself in destitute times and comes crawling back home seeking forgiveness and restitution. These two brothers are both, or at least the second brother, as he comes crawling back, is embraced by the father, and the brother who has been there all along following the rules is like, what? Who am I? What are you doing having the fatted calf for this jerk brother? I am here. If you're going to have a big party, if you're going to have a big celebration, it should be about me. The genre of stories that it falls within we call reversal stories. Stories in Luke's gospel in particular, it falls where the woman is sweeping for the lost coin, and the last shall be first and the first shall be last. It's also that the good shepherd leaves the flock and goes to catch the one lost sheep. It's that whole genre of story where when those that have all the privilege cards are going to be brought down low, and the one who's lost and alone and left out and hungry is all of a sudden going to receive the bounty that they deserve. These stories are incredibly good news for the community for whom the Bible was written by and for and about. People who know oppression firsthand, up close and personal, who feel the boot on their neck, who don't have enough to eat, who know struggle in real terms. These stories are incredibly rich and important. In a compelling write on this week's text, Paul at GerardianLectionary.com talks about what it is to be a white person reading these texts in America today. And in fact, we often, when we read biblical text, we want to identify with the one who is struggling and received and redeemed and embraced. But in this text, and quite frankly, when white folks read the Bible, we often misalign. We are typically, as white folks reading this text, the one that come with the privilege cards. We are actually the older brother. We're the one that's been sitting at the table all along. We're the one that's been dining at the table all along. We're the one that's already had lots of fatted calves. We're the one that's used to having the Father's loving embrace. And the question as we read this text is, as the good sibling that we have always been, what does this mean for us? And the text ends with a really open question because it doesn't say. It doesn't tell us that we too are loved. It doesn't tell us that we too are embraced by the Father. It doesn't say any of that. It leaves it as an open question. And more to the point, Paul would point out to us in his writing at GerardianLectionary.com, is that it lays bare our self-centered ego, that the story shows how much we are looking for ourselves. Right? So it's a really an important read, and I commend his writing to you for that. Reading the stories as a story about two brothers really resonates for me personally. So I appreciated that article all the more. I think for 45 years of my life, the first half of my life, I was the best, most studious, most rule-abiding, most faithful older brother that there ever was. I think I did everything in my power to honor all the cultural norms and mores, even as I was dying inside. Late in life, I was very late in life to claim my own truth. But when I did, when I was courageous enough finally to claim my own truth, it led me far from those tables, far from the grace of the Father, far from the things I had known, and at the same time led me to true love. So I feel both brothers, both truths. What both brothers have in common, and what I have realized on both sides of the table, is that what we really are seeking, what we're really wanting, is the embrace of the Father, the embrace of the parents. We're wanting acceptance, and we're both trying either as hard as we can to be good to get that acceptance, or trying as hard as we can to be bad to not care about the acceptance. But regardless, that we're really responding to the judgment or the perceived judgments in the parent character in this story. And I think that is pretty timeless and relevant. In a strange twist of internet wisdom, or perhaps it is divine intervention, or gosh, maybe just somebody's mistake, when I was searching for images of this story, I was searching for Prodigal Son images, and I came across this incredible picture that didn't look like a son to me. In fact, it was obviously a woman. It was a goddess. It was the goddess Persephone. It's a coloring page. I have no idea how the mix-up happened. And on the one hand, it has this incredible image of Persephone. This coloring book image has nothing to do with the Lucan text. And on the other hand, as I was holding this image alongside the text, all of a sudden, some things began to make sense to me. Persephone is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, and Persephone is taken by Hades against her will to the underworld. It's really kind of a terrifying story, honestly. And she's in the underworld, and Zeus and Demeter try to get her back, and they try, and there's all kind of shenanigans and failures and whatever. And ultimately, it's determined that Persephone will spend half of the year with Hades in the underworld and the other half of the year with Demeter, her mother. She provides a story of a way where there is no way, an inversion story, if you will, of pushing against the expected norms of death and decay in Hades, in the underworld, to blossom there. And it is a story of the blossom, the flower in the sidewalk crack, if you will, which is a push against the binary assumptions that everything in the underworld is bad, right? And everything up above is good. No, she's in the underworld, and she's beautiful, and she's brilliant, and she's good. Holding the image of Persephone and knowing the grief of her mother, I begin to wonder about the parental role in this story of the two brothers. We read it as two male brothers, and I gotta wonder what would be if they were sisters, right? They don't have to be brothers, but at any rate, the two siblings. And the story says father, but what if it were mother, right? Persephone's mother had a really unique role. I mean, Zeus and the mother were both players, but it's the mother that's the goddess of fertility and harvest who is so grieved when her daughter is gone that indeed there will be no harvest in that half of the year. During autumn and winter, there will be no harvest. The ground closes up, so deep is her grief when her child is gone. And when her child returns, so immense is her joy that the harvest is abundant throughout the spring and the summer. So as I read this story, I'm like, well, how would that change our reading, right? And our understanding of this parable? If we understood that the parent is incomplete without the children there, right? And I think about it as evangelical Christians, you know, the White House Bible study kind of Christians, is they wage war quite literally on the trans youth in America. And I think about it in terms of the United Methodist Church and their recent decision that gay clergy are not welcome and that same-gender marriages will not be celebrated in United Methodist churches. I think about all the people that are not at the table now. And I think about it even in traditions like mine in the United Church of Christ, where we say everybody's welcome and we nationally have a big brand about it, but in fact, local churches can and do choose to be very bigoted. And I think about what it means when people are excluded from the table. And what this story tells us is that when anybody is missing, when anyone is not there, it's winter. There is no harvest. There is no celebration. There is no fatted calf, and it is no surprise that church, white church in America, is quite literally dying. An often overlooked part of this passage is the way that the oppressive systems pit the siblings against each other in a battle of scarcity, like there's not enough to go around, when in fact, what we now know to be true is that there will be no harvest, there will be no fatted calf, there will be no celebration until all of the siblings are welcomed back, included, and gathered at the table. And the image, this random image of Persephone that appeared in my timeline this week, reminded me that when that happens, in the midst of the skulls, in the midst of the struggle, there will be incredible beauty and abundance and joy. The abundance of Persephone's image is a reminder that there is indeed enough for us all and bounty to share. May this be our reading.